everyone. Today we're going to be talking about how to create these beautiful painted pendants. More specifically, I'm going to show you how to paint the butterfly and the rose. But I'm also going to discuss how you can put the templates I've created onto a variety of different surfaces and make a variety of different types of pendants. I want to talk about the instructional packet that I put together for these necklaces. They include the instructions to paint all 5 of these pretty pendants, and there's a variety of pages of instructions for each individual necklace. And then I also give right underneath the palette, where I'm using mostly Deco Art Americana paints, I also give you the Prismacolor colored pencil conversion. So if this is too small for you to paint, you can always go ahead and create it with colored pencils. And then after all the instructions, what I've included is these templates. And you get all of these templates in the packet, and you can print them out. And the smaller ones are for the small dominoes, and these are for the larger dominoes, and then these are for the bales and bezels, and then also for the glass domes. So you can just create a variety of different types of pendants with these templates by colorizing all of them, so you can easily just keep printing these and make them for all of your family and friends and for yourself. What I've done though is I have printed the templates on 40-pound cardstock, and I printed it on a laser printer because, especially you can see on the rose, that I've created half tones. There's gray scales in here and on all of the flowers, and the reason I did it that way is because it will be easier to create form within the flowers. So when you print this, you have to make sure that you print it in a photo mode rather than in a text mode in order to make sure that you get the gray tones in here, and it will make it easier for you to paint. The pattern packet is available on my website, and I'll have a link underneath the video. Then the other thing I wanted to talk about is I also put together a kit so that you wouldn't have to go running around and get all these items. And these are called bezels. Some people call them trays, but you can see there's depth to them. And what we're going to do is paint the templates and put them in here. And I'm going to show you 2 different ways to fill them, either with the glass dome, and I'm also going to show you how to fill them with 2-part resin. Once the painting's completed and you put the glass dome on, it will look like this butterfly pendant. The glass dome though can also be used as a pendant all by itself. So if you wanted to fill this with 2-part resin, you can use this as a pendant. And that's what I did with this butterfly. And all you have to do is add the bail onto the back of it, and then you have a lovely pendant. I've also included a small domino and a large domino and a pin back along with 2 bails. So you can make these as if you put the bail on the back of it along with the pin. This can be both a pin and a necklace, or they can simply be necklaces. I've also included a rhinestone strip which goes around this small domino because it was pre-drilled with horizontal holes rather than vertical holes, and then as you glue these on, it will cover that. One of my favorite surfaces is this wooden domino because it's double-sided and you can actually have 2 different necklaces with just one surface. Then I've added the gemstones hanging from it, and I've also added the bail. So when you get the kit, this is already attached. Before you paint, you're going to make sure that you cover these with just some Scotch Magic tape, and it will be fine. And I just love the way that these turn out. This is the one side, and then this is the other side. And they're just so pretty with that sparkly bead on the end of it. I've also included in the kit 2 different lengths of chains. One's 18 and the other one's 20 inches. What's really wonderful is you can take the two different lengths of chains and use them in all of these surfaces. So you can put them through the bezels and you can put them through these bails which clip on to our dominoes. And then they also fit through this double-sided or reversible domino. And you can just make a variety of different types of jewelry. So let's get started painting. I have the printed template out and I've already come in and I have coated both the back and the front with multi-purpose sealer. I coated the back, I allowed it to dry, then I came in and I coated the front. What I also like to do then, before I begin, because the sealer can make it a little bit slick, I'm just going to go over it with a little bit of water and allow it to dry. Now while that's drying, I want to show you how I mix the paint and the water. What I've done is I put turquoise blue in here, and I've also put an eyedropper or two of water. And I use an old brush to mix it. And you want to keep mixing it so that there's no chunks of paint and no solid paint in it. Okay, and to begin, I have a dampened angle brush, and what I'm going to do is I go into the puddle of water, I blot it on paper towel, and then I come back over and I just go over the entire butterfly with the exception of the body. Okay, we're going to let that dry. Then while that's drying, I'm going to go into the burlap in the same way. I'm going to load it and then I blot it on my paper towel. And I'm going to just go over the whole thing. And this is just going to give it a little bit of an aged look. I like using an angle brush for these small templates for the necklaces because they're such small areas. And that way, if I have a small area, I can just use the toe of the brush. And then when I come out to a larger area, I can use more of the entire flat side, chisel side. For the body of the butterfly, I'm going to mix some water with black. And this is lamp black. And again, I'll use my old brush to mix this. And I really want to make sure that this is transparent. I want it to look more of like a lighter gray. So when I come in, I will blot my brush. Then I'm going to just fill in the center of the body. And you can see that looks like a light gray, which is exactly what I want it to look like. I have full strength turquoise blue, and I'm going to load my angle brush as if to float. I make sure that I only load a small amount into the brush. And then I'm going to just walk out my float. We still want to have just a little bit of the initial wash on the outside edge. While I have this color in my brush, what I want to do is I'm going to go on the outside edge and come in. We'll do it there. And we're going to do it over here now. It's going to make it look messy. But what's going to happen then is it's just going to add some tints onto the background. Then I have full strength black. I jokingly refer to loading 2 hairs of your brush, but what I'm going to do is barely put my brush into paint. Then I'm going to come over to my palette paper and work it in. So you can see how little was in there. I just barely put my brush into the paint because this has to be a very narrow float. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to shade the butterfly. I'll do both sides. And this is still very, very light. But we want to go very gradual with the shading. And that's about all I want on there. So we're going to let that dry and I'll come back to this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add some shades of Royal Navy onto the butterfly. And Royal Navy is an interesting color because it's actually a very, very dark turquoise color once you really work it into your brush. Let me show you down here. See how it's really turquoisey? And you would not know that to look at the color by itself, but once you work it in, you can see it's in the same color family as the turquoise blue. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to add some shades. So the first highlight color was here, then we came in and floated with the turquoise blue, and now I've just come in and covered a little bit smaller of an area. I'm going to start separating the top from the bottom, so I'm going to go underneath there too. And again, if I want to, I can just come in and add a blush of color here and here, and this is where we put the turquoise blue last time. And notice how I'm going outside the edges. I'm going to let that dry. Okay, this is all dry. What I'm going to do is put out some pansy lavender, and we're going to cover even a smaller area. I'll also go underneath. Oh, that's pretty. And I'll bring it underneath. Then I want to blush in some of this color. We can put it in some of the circle areas, but not too solid. We just want to give hints of color. Maybe just a little bit over here. I'm going to go in and load my brush again with the black. I'm going to just add a little bit more shading. I like that really well now. So this is still fairly light, and you can see the dimension in it. But I'm going to go in underneath where their top wing and the bottom wing is. And these are very, very light floats. I do not want to make my butterfly black by any means. Now if you want to use a liner brush, you can, but I'm going to put the antennae on the butterfly using my Identipen. I want to bring in some more of this purple color, the pansy lavender, and I'm loading my small number 1 brush. Or you can use a liner brush. And I have full strength paint in here. And I'm just going to add some purple in some of these spots. I'm putting out some snow white, and I'm going to get my liner brush. And I'm going to just tap down a few like little C-shaped lines in here, just to break up that darkness and make it look a little bit more uniform. As a matter of fact, I might even brighten up some of these areas down over here with the white. You could even put just a little bit of white every now and then throughout the rest of the spots. Just adding some variation. Okay, then we're going to cut it out. I have cut it out, but I've decided that I want to add some more color to the overall butterfly. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to float a little bit more of this Royal Navy, keeping it nice and light. I'm going to just give it a little bit more depth in doing so. Okay, let's go in and now let's try and add a little bit more of this pansy lavender. And we're going to just add a little bit more color. I think I'll just add a little bit more blush over here and along the outside edge. Now we're going to move on before I show you how to put all the pendants together, and I want to show you how to paint the rose before we get into finishing the pendants. I've also prepared the template for the rose, and I have coated it with water. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a old flat brush that has splayed out, and I'm going to come into some burlap, and I'm barely tipping the tips of the brushes in here. And I want to have a nice open stipple. What I want to do is just kind of convince the eye that this is parchment paper. I want to give it a little bit of a vintagey look. So I'm just coming in, and you can go outside the lines, don't worry about that. I don't want to cover any of the flower or the leaves with this stipple. And it's going to look really messy since I went outside the lines. Remember that we'll be cutting this out and putting it into the bezel frame, so it will be fine. Now I've gone ahead and I have mixed the peony pink with water. And I'm going to load my brush and then blot it. And we're going to just coat the entire rose with this pink. Let me zoom in just a little bit more. And there's a lot of gray areas in here. The gray will be diminishing as we come in and shave. This is yellow ochre that I've mixed with water. And I'm going to go over the leaves with this. And I also need to put the pink in by this little rose right here. We're going to just do that, and then we won't worry too much about bringing in leaves until later. Okay, then I'm going to go into my burlap wash that I created for the butterfly, and we're going to just wash over the entire background fairly quickly. This is the template for the bezel. If I were going to be working on the domino or the small domino, I would adhere that directly onto the surface before I colorized it. So I will adjust that after we're done painting this. Okay, now we need to let this dry, and I'll be back. So what I'm going to do while this is, now that it's dry, is I'm going to come in and I'm going to pick up some burlap and work it in my brush to float, and I'm going to just float along the outside edges. And you can go right outside the lines, and this will keep the softest part of the float on the necklace. It's going to look a little bit messy right now. Basically, I go underneath this whole area here, make that nice and dark. Then again, I've come in and I'm using a 1/2 inch angle brush. It's a big brush. If you want to go into a smaller brush, you can. I just like it because it holds more moisture for me. But it's how you load your brush. And I'm only loading 2 hairs of my brush, is what I jokingly say, but a very small amount. Then we're going to come in and we're going to shade those gray areas. So what I'm going to do is turn it and make it as comfortable as possible. And I'm looking for areas that have darkness. If you need to reload periodically, because you're only loading a small amount into your brush, you're going to have to reload quite frequently. But what's so important is that you keep these floats so narrow. What's nice is there's the gray area right in the template, and that pretty much will show you where you should go in and float. We have a lot of darkness right there. I'm going to just fill that in, and I'm going to come along the whole bottom area. And I'm going to come in behind here. I'll also go ahead and shade right there. You have to, whenever you're painting a rose, whether it's a little rose like this or an actual big rose, you have to take everything one petal at a time. This area in here is so little, it's going to look very confusing. There's no way you're going to be able to shade it and highlight it like you would a regular big rose. It's just too small of an area. I'm going to fill this whole underneath area in. I'm going to fill this entire area in. Now on this petal, we will shade it on the top edge. Such small areas. I can hear you guys screaming at me through the video. Okay, I'm going to constantly turn this to make it as comfortable as possible and for me to get into those small areas. All behind here will be shaded, and then we'll separate these two petals. I'm also going to go on the back side. And because we're using such a small amount in our brushes, chances are we're going to have to repeat these same shades once they're dry. Okay. And with the Rosebud, I'm going to just tap in some shading in between the little calyx leaves. Then I'm going to put out some Hauser medium green. I'm loading my brush in the same manner, just 2 hairs at a time, or a very small amount. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to do the bottom, and we'll go down one of the sides. Then I can turn it around and go down the other side. Do the same thing, but I'm in behind there, and I'm coming down the center. And remember, I did give you color pencil conversions, so if you would have an easier time colorizing these with colored pencil, just use the conversion that I've given you and use color pencil. The only difference is I would not prepare the surface in the same manner. I would just use the sealer behind it because it would make it a little bit slick. And then I would also, at the end when I'm all done, before I do anything else to it, adhering it to the bezel, I would definitely spray it with workable fixative so that the color pencil would not run, because sometimes color pencils run. Now I'm taking the Hauser medium green and the tip of my angle brush. You could use a liner brush for this, and I'm just filling in these little leaves. Okay, so we're going to go back in and I'm going to repeat the same exact shades I did with the Peony Pink in the same places, just to reinforce them and build up their values. Now, if you're painting this and for some reason your float gets way too big, you can really quickly use the back side of your brush to clean it up. But if you go in later on and you go, wow, I really need some more highlight, you could go in with some cotton candy and add highlights back in. That's extra work and I'm not going to do that, but that's only if you have lost your highlights. But you can see how now the shades are building up. We're not seeing as much gray as we did before. And it's just starting to look like a really pretty pink rose. Now, if you want to, you can take some of this pink color and just blush the top and maybe underneath here with it. Just adding some color within the design. When we cut this away, you're just going to barely see a hint of color. I'm going to go back in and I'm going to reinforce shades to the green areas. I'm using my Hauser medium green again, and I'm going back into all of the same areas. Okay, we're going to let that completely dry before we do the next step. So our rose is dried. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in and I'm going to wash over the entire thing with our wash again, with the wash of the peony pink. And what that's going to do is it's just going to even it out. You might have some areas that kind of look like there's a line instead of a shade. So that should just make it look a little bit more even for you. While we let that dry, I'm going to come in with my peony pink and I'm loading just 2 hairs on my brush, on my angle brush. And I'm going to come in without touching my rose. And I'm going to just put a little bit of pink on the tips of the leaves. Without going outside the lines. Now everything dries fairly quick because I'm in Nevada here. I just want to pick it up. I can still see that shining, so we need to let that dry. While it's drying, I'm going to get out some raspberry, some razzleberry. Your rose should be completely dry. Mine is fairly dry now. And I'm loading 2 hairs again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in the darkest of dark areas and put in these shades. And you can see it's mostly in the back areas. I might put just a little bit in here. It's just such a small area that we're working with. It's very hard to come in with second shades and second highlights and things like that because it's so tiny. And I might just add a little bit more of this. This is the razzleberry. And I'm just going off the edge like I did before, blushing it with some pink. I'm going to put out some Hauser dark green. And this I will load in the same manner. And what we'll do is we'll just come in and shade right behind the rose. Let's really make sure we work it in our brush so we don't want to have a line. And again, I'm just shading right next to the rose with this. Now I think that's looking really good. I want to show you what's going to happen now when we cut it out. I'm cutting right on and eliminating the line, otherwise it's not going to fit into the bezel. So I still have some line here. So then what I want to do is make sure it fits into the bezel. And if I get rid of the line, it should fit right in. And so there's just a little bit more on the outside edge. So right now I'm just pretty much cutting it and like shaving it. But I want to show you how I do this so that you will do the same thing. We're going to let that completely dry, but I wanted to make sure that it fit nicely, and you can see how it's going to fit into the bezel. What I want to do now is show you the various ways you can create pendants using the templates once they are all done painted. What I like to do before I use either one of the dominoes to turn into jewelry, I come in with multi-purpose sealer and I put a coat on. And then you can colorize the domino on the top and the sides to match your pendant. So for instance, if I was coming in with the poinsettia, I could come in and make this a black-green color to make it look like it's one piece rather than a piece of paper and a domino. So in this situation, I have come in and I have prepared it with the all-purpose sealer, and then I came in with the burlap and base coated over it. And then what I'll do is decoupage the butterfly onto it. Now I'm using the matte decoupage medium, and I'm just going to put a few dots on my palette paper. Then I can spread it on the domino and adhere my paper down. And I make sure I center it on here. I'm going to let it dry, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to put some more decoupage medium over it. Okay, it's dried, and I'm going to just very quickly go over it. I'll allow that to dry, and then I can come in and I can paint the butterfly. Now once the paper has completely dried and the matte decoupage medium is dry, what I do is I come in and I use the liquid glass clear medium on it, and this will act as a very shiny barrier to protect the paper. You can also use glossy accents, and then I just use a brush to spread it evenly. You want to make sure that it's a nice thin coat, so if you have a little bit of extra, I just lift it with my brush, because you don't want to have any brush strokes. And notice how I'm laying back on my hand. That way it takes all the pressure off the brush. If you put it on too thick, it's going to look a little bit cloudy and it's going to dry with a lot of streaks in it. So it would be much better to put multiple thin coats on rather than try to do one thick coat. Now the small domino can be handled in the same manner, where you come in and seal it with multi-purpose sealer and then base coat it in whatever color you want it to match the jewelry that you're making. But I must say that there are holes that were pre-drilled through the domino to make it a horizontal piece. So what I've included in each kit are these pretty rhinestone strips, so that once your design is done and you've got it all sealed on the top, what you can do then is just glue the backing on and you have a beautiful necklace, and then those holes aren't visible to the eye. So this surface can be painted on both sides. It has two small holes which can be filled with wood putty, or you can use a strand of rhinestones to put around it too. But I think with this bead, it's just right the way it is. And then this surface can also be painted the background color, and I would adhere the designs on before painting them or colorizing them. When you get this small, it is much easier to work with colored pencil. However, if you work with colored pencil, the surface might be a little bit slick and it might be hard to get the pencil to adhere to it. So you just have to go over it a couple times with coats of water, and the minerals in the water will give it truth again. I also come in, and while I'm painting it, I cover both the gems and the bail with Scotch tape so that I don't get paint on these items. Now you can adhere the painted template right inside of the bail and right inside of the bezel. And I like to use the Decoupage matte medium, so I put some off on to the side on my palette paper. Now you could also use E6000, but by using the matte medium, I know that I'm going to get a good coat. So what I'll do is I'll put it into the bezel itself and then also on the paper. So once it's on the paper, I will just press it in place. And then I will let this dry, but you want to make sure that you get all the air bubbles out. I use a clean pen and I push down on this. And the top has already been sealed. Then I want to make sure I go in with my clean fingers. So there is a little bit of decoupage medium coming up on the sides. So what will happen is after you spend all that time working on your painted template, you could actually lift the color with the decoupage on your fingers because it is a glue. So I just make sure that I protect my surface, and I'm really pressing really hard. Then I'm going to allow that to dry. If I used color pencil instead of paint, I would spray this with workable fixative before I try to decoupage it on, because the color pencil could actually bleed and lift off. Now before I put the glass on this piece, I want to add the liquid glass, but I also want to add some glitter into it, and I have this silver glitter. I like to add just a little bit of sparkle. You could also add some blue color, which might be really pretty. Before you use any of the glitters, you should test them to see if they're going to bleed. Sometimes colorized glitter will bleed with various mediums. Also, I prefer to use glass glitter and not plastic glitter, because that can melt actually in some mediums. So I put some liquid glass over on my palette paper, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to spread this evenly. I'm going to spread this evenly all over the surface. And really make sure you get it evenly all over, because this is what's going to make the glass adhere. Then I'll actually take my glitter, and you can use tweezers with this too, and I'm just going to put a little bit in here. You don't want the whole thing to be glitter. That's just going to give it a little bit of sparkle. And what I like about this, it's as fine as the Glamour Dust glitters, is the fact that it's so little, it's not going to cause a buildup. And I just want to make sure that I don't have too much here. Now I'm also going to take the glass dome, and I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to put some of the liquid glass on here. If you're not going to use glitter, you don't have to do this step, but I just like to make sure that I'm going to have enough liquid glass to really adhere my surface to the glass. I love those sparkles in it. Then I generally will take a paper towel and press very, very hard. Then if there's any excess liquid glass, we can wipe it away right away. And it is going to look just a little milky. It does take about 24 hours for this to completely dry. And as long as all of the medium has been wiped away, you can just set this and let this dry. And then once it's dry, you just slip the chain in and you have a beautiful pendant to wear. Now, since the bezel and the glass are separate, you could actually use these as two separate pieces. So in this situation, I've had to trim down the paper just a little bit more. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with my liquid glass, because this is going to go right onto the glass itself. I prefer the liquid glass because it dries perfectly clear. And it doesn't have any cracks or anything in it. I think it's pretty much self-leveling. So I use my brush to put on the liquid glass. And then I press the paper on. And what we'll do is press really hard, really press it down. And then all I have to do is adhere this onto the back of it, and then that can be used as a separate pendant. The other way, you can actually fill this with 2-part resin. Now I also like using 2-part resin. In this case it's ice resin to fill the bezels, and it is available from Hobby Lobby. And I prefer using the one that comes with the 2 plungers because this is dispersed evenly, and it's very important that everything is measured correctly when you're using 2-part resin. So I'm going to put some in a plastic container, enough to fill the bezel, and I'm going to follow the manufacturer's instructions, and I'll be back and show you how I use this. So when I'm going to use the resin, I make sure that I have come in and I've sealed this already on both sides, and I make sure I get the sides really good with the sealer. And now I'm going to go in with my decoupage medium and glue this into position. And I want to make sure that it's adhered really well, so I'm going to just go ahead and use my glass to force it into position. Then I'll take the glass out and allow this to completely dry. I've allowed the decoupage medium to completely dry, and I know that this is adhered. You cannot rush this process, because if you do, what's going to happen is the resin's going to get in underneath here and your paper could fade. It would just be ruined. So what I do is I've now let this sit, and most of the air bubbles are gone. So what I can simply do is pour this in. And I don't want to over pour it and have it come out. So you're going to see it's not really going to take a lot. I'm actually going to put this on top of a paint bottle, because with this on the back it won't be level, and it's going to be very important for you to keep this level. Now there's going to be air bubbles in it, so what I'm going to do is try to flick them out, and if they don't come out, I just use a little craft stick to try to get the big bubbles out. The rest should dissipate on their own. Another trick is to use a heat gun, and that will help eliminate a lot of the bubbles. So you can see that it kind of faded everything out, and that will appear again as it hardens. But I do want to come in with some glass glitter and add some pretty sprinkles in. So I want to show you that if you don't like where the glitter is at, you can come in and scoot that gently around with your craft stick, because this is going to take probably a good 12 hours before it's really hard to the touch. It will start setting after about 6 hours. It's also very important that your house is at least 70 degrees. So if you're going to be creating these during the winter, you may have to turn up your heat to make your house warm. It also does not like a lot of humidity, and it can fog up from that. So what I'm going to do is let this harden, and I will show you what it looks like once it's done. It's very important for me to keep this level, and it's on my painting table so I can tell that it's starting to want to run off. And so you're going to need a nice warm, dry, and level area to put this in. And make sure you can't just set it here because this will tip it. So you're going to need to put it on top of a surface that doesn't touch the sides, such as this paint bottle. Now it's been 12 hours and the resin has hardened. And what I've done is I've simply came in and just struck a little bit more of the resin on with a brush, and I put these little rhinestones in place here, and I think it just turned out so pretty. So whether you fill the bezels with resin, create the jewel dominoes, or the large dominoes, I hope you have learned how to create a variety of painted pendants using the templates I have created in my instructional packet. The packet and the kit are available on my website while quantities last. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you in another painting video with me. And also, please subscribe to my channel, and remember to click on the bell so you can be notified the next time I post a video. Until then, may painting always bring you joy.